In the final years of World War II, inside the heart of Nazi Germany, one man made a decision that would turn him from a loyal German officer into one of Adolf Hitler's deadliest enemies. His name was Claus von Stauffenberg, and this is the story of the man who came closer than almost anyone else to killing Hitler. Claus von Stauffenberg was born into an aristocratic German family in 1907. He grew up surrounded by wealth, discipline, and patriotism. From a young age, he believed deeply in Germany's greatness. Like many young Germans at the time, he saw the humiliation of Germany after World War I as a national disaster. The country was weak, poor, divided, and angry. So when Adolf Hitler rose to power in 1933, promising to rebuild Germany and restore national pride, many people supported him, including Stauffenberg. At first, he admired Hitler's vision of a stronger Germany. He joined the German army and quickly gained a reputation as intelligent, disciplined, and fearless. He was exactly the kind of officer Nazi Germany admired. But as the years passed, things began to change. When World War II began in 1939 with the invasion of Poland, Stauffenberg witnessed the brutal reality of Nazi rule. Villages destroyed, civilians executed, entire populations terrorized. As Germany invaded more countries across Europe, the violence became worse and worse. Then came the Eastern Front. In 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union. It became one of the bloodiest campaigns in human history. Millions died, and behind the front lines, Nazi death squads known as the Einsatzgruppen carried out mass executions of Jews, civilians, and political enemies. Stauffenberg was horrified. The Germany he thought he was serving was transforming into something monstrous. But opposing Hitler inside Nazi Germany was almost impossible. The Gestapo, Hitler's secret police, watched everyone. One wrong sentence could get you arrested. One act of betrayal could get your entire family executed. Still, inside the military, secret resistance groups were forming, and slowly Stauffenberg became part of them. By 1943, Nazi Germany was losing the war. The German army had suffered catastrophic defeats. At Stalingrad, an entire German army was destroyed. Allied bombers rained fire over German cities. American, British, and Soviet forces were closing in from every direction. Many officers realized Hitler was leading Germany toward total destruction, but Hitler refused to surrender. He demanded impossible victories. He ordered soldiers to fight to the death. Anyone suggesting retreat was called a traitor. Inside military headquarters, fear spread rapidly. And that's when some officers reached a terrifying conclusion. Hitler had to die. The injury that changed everything. In 1943, Stauffenberg was severely wounded during combat in North Africa. He lost his left eye, he lost his right hand, and 2 fingers on his remaining hand were gone. Most people thought his military career was over, but instead his injuries pushed him deeper into the resistance movement, because despite his wounds, he still had something extremely valuable: access to Hitler. Stauffenberg's position allowed him to attend high-level military meetings. He could get physically close to the Führer himself, and suddenly the resistance realized something unbelievable. They finally had a chance. Operation Valkyrie. The plan was called July 20th Plot. Officially, Operation Valkyrie was an emergency military plan designed to maintain order if Germany fell into chaos. But the conspirators secretly rewrote the plan. Their idea was simple and incredibly dangerous. First, kill Hitler. Then, use the German Reserve Army to seize control of Berlin, arrest Nazi leaders, take over communication centers, and negotiate peace with the Allies before Germany was completely destroyed. If it worked, they could end the war. If it failed, every single conspirator would die. July 20th, 1944. The morning of July 20th began like any other day, but hidden inside Stauffenberg's briefcase was a bomb. He traveled to Hitler's military headquarters deep inside East Prussia, known as the Wolf's Lair, a heavily guarded fortress surrounded by forests, bunkers, mines, and armed soldiers. Nobody suspected him. After all, he was a decorated German officer, loyal, trusted, respected. As the military meeting began, Stauffenberg quietly armed the bomb inside a nearby room. But because of his injuries, Preparing the explosives was extremely difficult. He only managed to activate one of the two bombs. That mistake may have changed history forever. He walked into the conference room, placed the briefcase beside Hitler, and slowly stepped away. Minutes later, he left the building. Then, at 12:42 p.m., the bomb exploded. The explosion. The blast ripped through the room with enormous force. Wood shattered. Windows exploded outward. Smoke and fire filled the air. Several officers were killed instantly. Others were torn apart by the explosion. Stauffenberg saw the chaos from outside and believed Hitler was dead. He immediately flew back to Berlin to begin the coup. For a few brief hours, history stood still. The conspirators activated Operation Valkyrie. Orders were sent across Germany. Some officers obeyed, others hesitated. Confusion spread everywhere. And then the impossible happened. Hitler survived. Why Hitler lived? Hitler escaped death because of pure luck. The briefcase had been moved. One of the officers unknowingly pushed it behind a thick oak table leg. That heavy piece of wood absorbed much of the explosion. Even more importantly, the meeting had been moved from a concrete bunker into a room with open windows because of the summer heat. The blast pressure escaped outward instead of being trapped inside. If the meeting had stayed in the bunker, Hitler almost certainly would have died. Instead, he suffered relatively minor injuries. Burned clothes, a damaged ear, cuts and bruises. But he was alive. And once Germany learned that Hitler survived, the coup collapsed instantly. The hunt for the conspirators. That night, chaos erupted in Berlin. Some officers still believed the coup could work. Others panicked. Phone calls flooded military headquarters. Nobody knew who to trust. Then Hitler himself spoke on the radio. His voice shocked the nation. He announced that he had survived an assassination attempt, and he promised brutal revenge. Immediately, the Gestapo launched a massive manhunt. Thousands were investigated. Hundreds were arrested. The resistance network unraveled within hours. Stauffenberg was captured the very same night. The execution. Just before midnight, Stauffenberg and several co-conspirators were dragged into the courtyard of the Bendler Block military headquarters in Berlin. They were sentenced to death. No real trial, no mercy. Witnesses later said Stauffenberg remained calm until the very end. Moments before being shot, he reportedly shouted, "Long live sacred Germany!" Then the firing squad opened fire. He was 36 years old. Hitler's revenge. Hitler's revenge was merciless. More than 7,000 people were arrested. Around 5,000 were executed. Some were hanged with piano wire in especially cruel executions, personally ordered by Hitler. Others were tortured by the Gestapo. Families of conspirators were imprisoned. Even children were punished. Hitler wanted to erase every trace of resistance. But despite the terror, the assassination attempt proved something important. Not every German blindly followed Hitler. Even inside the heart of Nazi Germany, there were people willing to risk everything to stop him. Hero or opportunist? Today, historians still debate Stauffenberg's legacy. Was he a hero, or was he simply trying to save Germany after the war was already lost? The truth is complicated. Stauffenberg was not a modern democratic activist. He held conservative nationalist beliefs and initially supported parts of Hitler's rise. But in the end, he chose resistance over obedience, and he knowingly walked into one of the most dangerous assassination attempts in history. A mission he understood would probably kill him. The question that still haunts history: what if the bomb had worked? World War II might have ended earlier. Millions of lives may have been saved. Europe's future could have changed completely. Or perhaps the chaos inside Germany would have created an even bloodier civil war. Nobody knows. But for a few moments on July 20th, 1944, the fate of the world rested inside a single briefcase. But history did not change. Hitler survived. And from that moment on, the final chapter of Nazi Germany became even darker. A dictator consumed by paranoia. After the explosion at the Wolf's Lair, Hitler became obsessed with betrayal. He no longer trusted his own generals. Many officers who had once stood proudly beside him were suddenly under suspicion. The atmosphere inside Nazi Germany changed almost overnight. Fear spread through military headquarters, government offices, and even private homes. The Gestapo began arresting anyone connected to the conspiracy. Phones were tapped, letters were intercepted. Interrogations lasted for days. Some prisoners were tortured until they revealed names of other suspected conspirators. And once the arrest began, they never seemed to stop. Hitler's brutal revenge. Hitler wanted revenge not only against the people who tried to kill him, but against anyone who had ever doubted him. Thousands of people were investigated. Military officers, politicians, intellectuals, and even family members of the conspirators were dragged into prisons. Some were forced into fake trials before the infamous Nazi People's Court. The judge, Roland Freisler, screamed insults at the accused while humiliating them in front of cameras. The trials were designed to terrify Germany, and the executions were even worse. Some conspirators were hanged slowly using piano wire. Hitler reportedly watched recordings of these executions for entertainment. The message was clear. Loyalty was no longer enough. Absolute obedience was required. Germany begins to collapse. As Hitler hunted enemies inside Germany, the war outside was collapsing rapidly. Allied bombers reduced entire cities to rubble. Factories burned through the night. Food shortages became severe. Millions of civilians fled westward, terrified of the approaching Soviet army. On the Eastern Front, German soldiers were exhausted, starving, and overwhelmed. Entire divisions disappeared in brutal battles. But Hitler refused to accept reality. He still believed Germany could somehow win. Even when his generals warned him the situation was hopeless, he exploded in rage. He accused officers of cowardice, traitors, weakness. To Hitler, defeat was never his fault. It was always someone else's betrayal. The final days of the Third Reich. By April 1945, Soviet forces had reached Berlin itself. Battle of Berlin had begun. Explosions shook the city day and night. Buildings collapsed into burning streets. Smoke covered the sky. And beneath the ruins of Berlin, Hitler hid inside his underground bunker. Inside, the atmosphere was surreal. Some officers still pretended victory was possible. Maps were spread across tables, showing armies that barely existed anymore. Hitler continued giving impossible orders to troops that had already been destroyed. But everyone knew the truth. The Third Reich was dying. The end of Hitler. On April 30th, 1945, as Soviet soldiers closed in only blocks away, Hitler made his final decision. He would never allow himself to be captured alive. Inside the bunker, he married Eva Braun, his longtime companion. Less than 24 hours later, both were dead. Hitler committed suicide with a gunshot. Eva Braun took poison. Their bodies were carried outside, soaked in gasoline, and burned in a crater near the bunker entrance. The man who had once controlled most of Europe was gone. Only days later, Nazi Germany surrendered. World War II in Europe was finally over, but the scars left behind would remain forever. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. See you in the next video.